Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is R.S. Raghu, and with me is Aditi Lumba, bringing glimpses of major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment, and more. As the world fights the COVID-19 pandemic, we begin with a message of caution to stay safe and protected by following these three simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain social distancing, focus on hand and face hygiene. The headlines. Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi calls for a mass movement towards resilient infrastructure at the International Conference on Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Uzbekistan receives Made in India COVID-19 vaccines under Vaccine Maitri initiative. India, Brazil, South Africa reaffirmed their commitment to address gender gap and women-centric issues through mutual cooperation. US sanctions 24 Chinese officials over Beijing's decision to unilaterally undermine Hong Kong's electoral system. Prime Minister Narendra Modi pays homage to Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman on his 100th birth anniversary. And in sports, ISSF Shooting World Cup 2021 to begin from Thursday in Delhi. In women's cricket, India lose to South Africa by 5 wickets in fifth and final ODI in Lucknow. Concede series 1-4. Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, has said that there is a need to foster a global ecosystem of innovation in view of the challenges posed by COVID-19 pandemic. He was addressing the International Conference on Disaster Resilient Infrastructure CDRI this afternoon. Speaking at the event, the Prime Minister said, COVID-19 pandemic has taught us that in an interdependent and interconnected world, no country, rich or poor, in the East, West, North and South, is immune to the effect of global disasters.
We are witnessing an event that is being termed a once-in-a-100-year disaster. COVID-19 pandemic had taught us that in an interdependent and interconnected world, no country, rich or poor, in the east or west, north or south, is immune to the effect of global disasters.
The Prime Minister said, on one hand, the pandemic has shown us how impacts can quickly spread across the world, and on the other hand, it has shown how the world can come together to fight a common threat. Mr. Modi said, infrastructure systems like digital infrastructure, shipping lines, aviation networks cover the entire world, and effect of disaster in one part of the world can quickly spread across the world. He stressed that cooperation is a must for ensuring the resilience of the global system. The Prime Minister cautioned that the lessons from the pandemic must not be forgotten. They apply to not only public health disasters, but other disasters as well. He said that it will take sustained and concerted efforts to mitigate climate change. The Prime Minister pointed out that the year 2021 is a particularly important year and we are approaching the midpoint of the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement and the Sendai Framework. He said the expectations from COP26 to be hosted by the UK and Italy later this year are high, and this partnership on resilient infrastructure must play its important role in helping meet some of those expectations. Elaborating on key priority areas, Prime Minister Modi said CDRI must embody the central promise of the Sustainable Development Goals, that is, leave no one behind. The Prime Minister said the CDRI must maximize the demonstration effect of the application of technology. He added that the notion of resilient infrastructure must become a mass movement, galvanizing the energies of not just the experts and formal institutions. As pharmacy of the world, India continues to provide a healing hand to the world recovering from COVID-19. Under its Vaccine Maitri initiative of Uzbekistan, received Made in India vaccines on Wednesday. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has said India's reputation as pharmacy of the world stands reinforced the way it reached out to other countries in midst of a global crisis by supplying COVID-19 vaccines to 72 nations. Making a statement on Vaccine Maitri initiative in the upper house of the Parliament, Rajya Sabha, on Wednesday, he said, The supply of Made in India vaccine to 72 nations when the world was reeling under COVID-19 pandemic prompted global leaders and world citizens extend warmth to India and its citizens. Talking about low fatality rates and high recovery rates, he said, "Our reputation as the pharmacy of the world has been reinforced. So indeed, the world has faith in Make in India." But more than the vaccines, New Delhi's policies and conduct have emerged as a source of strength for the stressed and vulnerable nations of the world.
Our domestic vaccination program started in January 2021, and within a few days we also started with our immediate neighbors. We also offer to enhance cold chain and storage capacities for the delivery of vaccine. As a prominent nation in an increasingly multipolar world, the international community has great expectations of us, and we in turn are prepared to demonstrate our willingness to shoulder greater responsibility.
The 6th India-Brazil-South Africa's Women's Forum meeting was held virtually on Tuesday. During the consultation, the forum discussed key issues that contribute towards the transformation of women's lives. The India-Brazil-South Africa Trilateral Cooperation Forum is a unique platform which brings together India, Brazil and South Africa and 3 large democracies and major economies from 3 different continents. The meeting was led by the Ministry of Women and Child Development, Government of India. During the meeting, the ministers reaffirmed their commitment towards addressing gender gap and women-centric issues through mutual cooperation. The growing connectivity between India and Bangladesh is benefiting the business and industries in Bangladesh also. The inland waterways has the potential to spur trade between the 2 countries. Business houses are using the protocol routes on the inland waterways to export to India. A report from our Dhaka correspondent.
The first shipment of food products exported from Bangladesh to India using the inland waterways left the Pran Industrial Park from Palash in Narsingdi on Tuesday. Bangladesh Minister of State for Shipping Khalid Mahmood Chowdhury flagged off the ship. It will cover a distance of about 710 kilometers to Kolkata in 8 days. Earlier, the items were being sent through trucks, which resulted in higher cost and wastage of the products on the way. Rajesh Jha, World News, All India Radio, Dhaka.
Bangladesh is celebrating the historic event of its liberation from Pakistan and the birth centenary of its founding father Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. A 10-day-long celebration kicked off in Bangladesh today. AIR special correspondent in Dhaka has sent this report.
17th March is a historic day for Bangladesh as it marks the birth anniversary of the founding father of the country, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. This year also marks 50 years of the liberation of Bangladesh from Pakistan. The 10-day-long celebration started today with the birth anniversary of Sheikh Mujib, and it will conclude on the Liberation Day of Bangladesh on 26th March. The main function was held at the parade ground in Dhaka, where the President of Maldives, Ibrahim Mohammed Solih, was the chief guest. The outdoors programs are being organized only with a very limited number of invited guests in view of the surge in COVID-19 cases in the country. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will join the celebration as chief guest on the concluding day on 26th March. Rajesh Jha, AIR News, Dhaka.
Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, on Wednesday paid homage to Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, a champion of human rights and freedom, on his birth anniversary. In a tweet, Mr. Modi said he is a hero for all Indians too. Prime Minister said it will be his honor to visit Bangladesh later this month for the historic Mujib Borsho celebrations.
The United States on Wednesday sanctioned 24 Chinese and Hong Kong officials over Beijing's decision to unilaterally undermine Hong Kong's electoral system. The move came ahead of U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's meeting with top Chinese diplomats in Alaska later this week. In a statement, Blinken said the move was in response to new restrictions introduced by Beijing on democracy in Hong Kong, which will further restrict the right of people in the city to stand for election. China earlier this month voted to pass legislation on Hong Kong's electoral system. Now let's take a look at the coronavirus updates from around the world.
French Prime Minister Jean Castex has said that the country entered into a third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. The 7-day average of new cases rose above 25,000 for the first time since November in France. It is grappling with a steady rise of new cases leading to heavy strain on the country's hospital system. Vietnam's first domestically developed COVID-19 vaccine called NanoCovax is expected to be available by the fourth quarter of this year and put into use in 2022. Vietnam government said 4 local companies were engaged in vaccine research and production and 2 were undertaking human tests, including on NanoCovax and the Covivac vaccine. Vietnam has been relying on the AstraZeneca vaccine so far. Since launching vaccinations on the 8th of March, more than 20,000 people have been inoculated vaccines in the country. Philippines Health Minister said on Wednesday that a wider lockdown in the country cannot be ruled out if its surge in COVID-19 infections continues. It has announced strict curbs on international arrivals to arrest the virus spread. Foreigners and some returning citizens will be barred from entering the country for 1 month from March 20th. Australia said on Wednesday that it will ask the European Union to release 1 million doses of a COVID-19 vaccine to help Papua New Guinea battle a surge in COVID-19 cases. Iceland Prime Minister Katrin Jakobsdottir has said that Iceland will this week open its border to all visitors who have been vaccinated against COVID-19 without mandatory testing or quarantine. Nishit Kumar for World News.
Meanwhile, in India, the government on Wednesday said that 70 districts in 16 states have seen an increase in COVID-19 cases by 150% in the last 15 days. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Wednesday interacted with chief ministers of various states on the COVID-19 situation through video conference. During the interaction, the Prime Minister stressed the need to take quick and decisive steps to stop the emerging second peak of corona immediately. This is All India Radio giving you the world news.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Finnish counterpart Sanna Marin held wide-ranging discussions during a virtual summit on Tuesday. The two prime ministers stressed on the warm and friendly ties between the two nations for more than 7 decades of their diplomatic relations based on shared principles and values of democracy, rule of law, and respect for human rights. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion with former diplomat Anil Wadhwa on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's virtual summits with global leaders and new paradigm.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Prime Minister of Finland, Sanna Marin, held a virtual summit on the 16th of March. As the world is beginning to get out of the COVID pandemic, the things like virtual summits are becoming increasingly a reality, and this was one of the most important ones that the Indian Prime Minister has held recently. And the agenda with Finland covers a very wide range of issues. The two Prime Ministers spoke at some length about the shared values of democracy, rule of law, equality, freedom of speech, and a commitment to work for multilateralism and rules-based international order and so on. But what is also important is the other agendas that India and Finland have. And these include things, of course, like climate change and the environment, but also, very importantly, education and the Arctic Circle, in which both are members. Anil, I'd like to ask you, what is the significance of these virtual summits and why is Finland important to India?
As far as Finland is concerned, I think it's a very progressive, society and economy today. As you know, Finland is a world leader in technology, in science, and in education in particular. And within the European Union, plays a very important role as far as the whole policy towards sustainability partnerships is concerned. This was a very extensive agenda. Obviously, it was not just the digital partnership that India and Finland talked about. And as we move forward, the progress, the digital domain will become very important for India. Plus, we had a high-level dialogue which was set up on education ministries of both countries. Then they talked about a sustainability partnership, which involves a number of very important issues like clean energy and circular economy and sustainable development and growth, etc. But very importantly, how does India and Finland cooperate in the Arctic, which is now coming up as a very hot topic. In future, it will become very important as well. Countries, how they can cooperate in Africa, how can they strengthen multilateralism, and of course, EU and India relationship, where Finland is a major player, as I said, where Finland is a country which stresses on gender equality, for instance. It wants to strengthen the WTO. and brings in the element of biodiversity into this relationship, which is again very important subject for India. So between these, if you look at the diversity of this, the subjects that were discussed, it's very clear that India and Finland, the relationship becomes very important in the context of the future development of India and the vision that it has in terms of the transformation of its society for the common good of its population.
Right. Among the major things that is now beginning to happen, of course, in any discussions at the level of government and heads of state is the COVID-19 pandemic, the world gradually beginning to get out of this pandemic. So at this particular summit, the Prime Ministers emphasized the tremendous global efforts that have been in place to speed up the development and manufacture and research into the manufacture of COVID-19 vaccines. And Prime Minister actually said that India has provided over 59 million doses to more than 16 countries, including through COVAX. Prime Minister Marin of Finland also said that, they've invested heavily in research work, particularly through COVAX and in new technologies for COVID-19 vaccines. Going ahead, how important, again, do you think this new sort of global collaboration in what we are calling the COVID Maitri program are going to be in terms of India's engagement with other countries?
It's very important that India gets all the support from as many countries as possible in the multilateral context as far as WTO is concerned with its program of Vaccine Maitri. As you rightly said, already these 59 million doses given to 70 countries speaks a lot through COVAX. And India is determined that the multilateral system must support this effort. It should not be regressive, and that as many countries as possible and populations around the world should benefit through this effort. Now, of course, India is quite well placed in terms of its production capacity, etc., but does not want, things like IPRs and curbs on technology and equipment to come in the way of expanding and ramping up this production, which is, after all, for the common good.
Exactly. In fact, India and Finland also have Africa as a fairly important part of their bilateral agenda. And Africa is the continent that sort of lends itself to something like this, where the joint efforts without looking into IPRs makes a lot of difference in terms of providing vaccines to all of the 54 countries there, because Africa has been one of the countries that is seriously lagging thus far in getting doses of the vaccination. So India, sustainable development, clean energy, all of these things are on the agenda that India and Finland have, with Africa as a center also of their discussions and conversations and work going forward and the partnership. How do you think India and Finland can actually hone in on their joint efforts to make a difference in Africa?
If we look at the joint statement which has been issued at the end of this summit meeting, it stresses a lot on research and development, innovation, energy and clean technologies, and of course trade and investment. But, what is most important is that Africa was singled out as a very important area for collaboration going forward. And I think the two countries have decided also that later in the year they would have a separate meeting on Africa to identify the particular areas where they would be working together. Now, obviously, as you rightly said, the development aspect in Africa is the focus. But at the same time, they would like to pool in their own, strong points. The Finnish strong point on innovation and science and technology, and the Indian expertise as well, and the experience in Africa which they have working for many, many years on development cooperation, the human resources that India has deployed in Africa already, and the excellent relationship that India enjoys with African leaderships and countries over the years. So if you put these all together, obviously, it is going to help the continent develop much more than it could otherwise. And also, it would help both countries to do more of trade and investment or joint projects together, which would help both countries.
And another very, very critical part that both Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Marin have emphasized, I believe, is the whole green growth and the sustainability of development efforts that are happening in Africa, and essentially dealing with these massive issues of biodiversity loss and freshwater and ocean degradation, deforestation, desertification, and pollution, all of which of course, are very, very crucial not only to Africa, but certainly to India as well and the rest of the world, given how much climate change is impacting all of us. So these are again issues in which the Nordic countries particularly and Finland in particular have a great deal of expertise. So is this also something that India at the Nordic Council, for example, the summit level meetings which Prime Minister Modi sort of initiated with these Scandinavian countries, is this all gelling into sort of melding into part of this whole effort to ensure sustainability of development?
Yes, I think you rightly said that the Nordic countries and Finland in particular are leaders in this respect. And obviously, India needs a partnership with the Nordic countries in this respect as well, other than, of course, working together in Africa on these issues. But the India-Nordic Summit is going to happen later this year. And as preparation for that, it's important that India engages with as many Nordic countries, before that in preparation for this summit. Of course, before that, we have the India-European Union Leaders Summit in Portugal in May as well. But equally, the India-Nordic Summit later this year would be very important for these particular issues that you mentioned, especially clean energy and circular economy and sustainable development and green growth. Because it's here that India, with its large population and, the problems of degradation, etc., which it has faced because of a resource crunch, obviously needs the best of technologies going forward and making sure that the switch is made in time for India to be accepted as a leader in the effort towards climate change and green growth going forward.
The Arctic is another area that both India and Finland share very closely. In fact, at the last meeting of the Arctic Council, India regained its observer status, as it were, in the Finland meeting in May 2019. And India was re-elected as an observer to the Arctic Council. Now, how important is collaboration between India and Finland in the Arctic Council? And why is the Arctic Council really that important for not just India, but for the rest of the world?
So there are two main reasons why the Arctic Council has become very important for the rest of the world, and that is because of the climate change, which has resulted in new routes being opened up due to melting of ice. That's one, and related to that is the preservation of the Arctic as a zone which does not degrade further, so that it does not affect climate change all over the world. Secondly, in terms of scientific research that it can provide, in terms of the lessons learned about what has happened and the projections that can be made, the models that can be made, which are very useful for future climate change negotiations. But more importantly, and this is the second point, is that there suddenly seems to be a competition in that area on the polar route, which is the shipping route. Now, obviously, so far, this route is open only for a few months. But if this trend continues and the ice keeps melting, as we have seen over the past few years, that will open up a new area of competition among the big powers. And there are countries like China who are in Asia, but at the same time, they have ambitious plans to make sure that they utilize this to the best of their ability, lay claims to the area as much as possible. And of course, there is competition with the United States and the Russian Federation as well. There are outside powers who are involved. India has been actually involved in research in this area for quite some time. It has 2 stations already, scientific stations. One of the first countries, the pioneering countries to have done so. Now, that is more done because of scientific research and to study the effects of climate change and effects on biodiversity. But I'm sure India would like to expand its presence there.
The other thing that I was reading in the joint statement that appeared very, very important was the whole emphasis on this high-level council for education that both countries are planning on setting up. What exactly is this going to be, sort of research-oriented? What is their stress going to be on in this collaboration?
India has just come up with a new education policy, and India wants to actually, ensure that India transforms itself, in terms of the knowledge of its population going forward. The young population should be more rounded. They should not be focused upon just one issue, but actually should understand a number of issues. So that's what we call holistic education, starting from the school level on to the college and university level. And we already have a consortium, an MOU on sort of consortium between 10 Finnish universities and the 23 IITs. Now, what we decided to do at the summit is to extend this MOU for another 5 years. Why? Because, we found it extremely important and useful that the emphasis which they have on innovation, that should continue. And as you know, the Indian government's policy lately has been on a lot of emphasis is being given to startups and innovation side, so that we have not only employment but also new technologies which emerge from this effort. The government is also supporting it in a very big way. And since Finland has been a leader in the digital domain, and obviously their education focuses a lot on quantum technologies and computing and future mobile technologies, and then moving on from there to the focus on 6G research and development, the kind of future education that will emerge in the next few years, and then the focus on digital transformation of teaching and learning. So all these are very essential and cross-cutting elements which will lead to the efforts towards utilization of artificial intelligence or cybersecurity or blockchain technologies going forward. So India wants to develop that culture in its universities. And this is the dialogue which will happen in the future. And that's why was very important for us to extend this MOU with Finland.
Great, Anil. Thank you so very much.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press.
The New York Times reports that 8 people killed and 6 of them Asian in Atlanta area shootings. The Washington Post writes that as Myanmar protesters torch Chinese factories, workers are caught in spiraling crisis. The Guardian reports that UK urged to ban fur imports from China over animal abuse claims. It also carried a report that Japanese court rules gay marriage ban is unconstitutional. The Sydney Morning Herald writes that a surge in migrants trying to cross from Mexico into the US at the southern border has given Republicans an opening to go on the attack against the new administration. Global Times reports that Greece-Turkey maritime talks failed to reach breakthrough. The Himalayan has reported that a UN delegation makes first visit to a remote Bay of Bengal island where Bangladesh has moved more than 13,000 Rohingya refugees since December. Khaleej Times writes that Election Commission of Pakistan has issued notice to Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan's Tehreek-e-Insaf Party, PTI, to explain their stance over secrecy of scrutiny in the PTI foreign funding case. Nishit Kumar for World News.
Moving on to sports, International Shooting Sport Federation ISSF Shooting World Cup 2021 will begin from Thursday at the Dr. Karni Singh Shooting Ranges in Delhi. In women's cricket, South Africa defeated India by 5 wickets in the 5th and the final one-day international in Lucknow on Wednesday to clinch the series by 4-1. In badminton, ace India shuttler PV Sindhu today cruised to the second round of All England Open Championships after beating world number 32 Malaysia's Sonia Sher. World number 7 Sindhu won the match by 21-11, 21-17 in 39 minutes in the first round.
A quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, calls for mass movement towards resilient infrastructure at the International Conference on Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Uzbekistan receives Made in India COVID-19 vaccines under Vaccine Maitri initiative. India, Brazil, South Africa reaffirmed their commitment to address gender gap and women-centric issues through mutual cooperation. US sanctions 24 Chinese officials over Beijing's decision to unilaterally undermine Hong Kong's electoral system. Prime Minister Narendra Modi pays homage to Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman on his 100th birth anniversary. And in sports, ISSF Shooting World Cup 2021 to begin from Thursday in Delhi. In badminton, Indian shuttler PV Sindhu cruises to second round of the All England Open beating Malaysia's Sonia Sher. India is celebrating the 151st birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan Vaishnav Jan by artists from Ireland.
Vaishnava Jana Tog Tene Kahiye Je Pira Parayi Jane Re Paraduke Upakare Kare Toye Mahanabdi Mahanane Re Sakaloke man sahune bande nindana kare.
And with that, we end this bulletin. See you at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.